Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Wednesday, March 19th, 2025 at 9:04 in the morning. So we're starting our day. We're continuing to discuss career and technical education. And so first we have Jody Emerson, Association of Career and Technical Directors. Jody, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Well, now I don't have to be fair.
This is what you look like in person.
Yeah, right. What's up with Michael? He's not here this morning. I have a few things for him. He's like, oh no, she's coming. It's beer. My testimony yesterday said good afternoon, but it's morning now. So good morning. I'm Jody Emerson, Superintendent Director of the Central Vermont Career Center in Barre, and this year's president of the Vermont Association of Career and Technical Education Directors. I know Eric Bremers is on later, and he is our vice president, so he'll step into this role next year. As you heard from Jay yesterday, VACT had struggled with this conversation about what would be best, and so I'm really grateful to hear that you're looking for pros and cons to all possible solutions, because we cannot come to an agreement as a whole group on what would be best. There are lots of different perspectives on that. Our priority is making sure that there's access, which is something Kendall said yesterday as well. So I really appreciated the deputy commissioner on that one. And we want to maintain some identity for CTE programming, making sure that our instructors for those programs do come out of industry, because those are the skills that we need and the connections that we need to our business partners. I wanted to talk a little bit today, based on the bill that you had, about the links between our centers and the host schools that we're in, because none of us are standalone. A few of us have some standalone buildings that are off-site, but nobody is a standalone CTE. And so we share it just in Barre. We share the Wi-Fi, we share the power, we share the phone system. We have, we share an emergency operations plan where we have some different components of it, but we share all that, and we share the camera system. And so all of the operations of the building are shared between the two groups, even though we're two separate districts. And it is difficult to kind of negotiate and figure out what percentage of those costs belong to the Career Center and what percentage belong to the host school, and how does that work? So I just wanted to talk a bit about that inextricable link between the two, and why we're kind of saying it might not make sense to take CTE separately from the whole of education when you're thinking about moving forward transformation, which we all agree it's time for something to change. There are, as we talked about yesterday, 17 CTE centers in Vermont. 15 are either in a host or the independents. And then there's the 2 that are part of the comprehensive high schools that are private. We schedule our emergency drills together. We plan our events so that we don't have evening events at the same time together. So there's lots of work that needs to be done. And when I hear my colleagues that are most concerned about a single CTE district, they're the ones that have really good connections with that host high school and fear the loss of those resources and those relationships. And so whatever happens, if we move to that or if we don't, we need to make sure that we're maintaining relationships while we're still trying to align access and equity to CTE across the state. Some of the things we also want to take into account is that students are often having to choose. They might need to choose between a class that's a graduation requirement that they haven't met yet in a CTE program, or between a course they really want. I've often heard the governor talk about how he wanted to do those college prep courses in his high school, and he wanted to do the CTE, and he was able to do both. And that's not true for students across the state, depending on the variation in the programming. And any student who attends early college is thus ineligible to attend CTE. And so some of the centers that are half-day programs that go 2 years, the students start with them, they do their 1 year, and then they choose early college, and they can't go and finish out that second year, even if their early college is online and they could actually physically be there. And so that hurts the enrollment of that center, because they're losing the students in that second year, and you can't just pull students into a second year program that haven't had the first year. And so trying to think about those conflicts in the greater system. And I'm going to speak to a couple of things I heard yesterday. I heard that the comprehensive high school is a goal for some, and like I said, it's too bad Mike's not here. And I heard somebody say that it was like the 20-year goal. Whether it's the 5-year, 10-year, 20-year goal, it was definitely in the report from the agency after the Listen and Learn tour. And so it looks like it's a goal for the state. If it is, can we use our backward design process and really think, when do we want that in place and how do we build up to it? Because if you're going to pull Vermont CTEs out of the overall system and then throw them back in later, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's not do multiple transitions. It's about time you got here. I've called you out twice.
You called me out twice. I'm so sorry. I had to park in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, I should have picked you up.
And I'm very sorry.
It's all good.
Really sorry.
So I was just saying that the comprehensive high school model, if that's a goal, then we shouldn't make a separate district for CTE if we're gonna recombine later. Like, we really need to look at what's the goal and step back and how do we access that? I have a concern in the bill about all the PD coming from the Agency of Education. Does that mean the new school district, if it were a CTE district, does not get to deliver professional development to its staff? That was a concern I had in the draft language of the bill. And my biggest concern for me, and this is not as VACTED president, but as superintendent director at Central Vermont Career Center, the moratorium on new CTE centers and programs feels very directed at my center, because we are in progress of looking to build and go to bond this fall. And this would say we can't. And it also says no new programs from July 1, 2025 to July 1, 2028. And so that could limit access. If I want to duplicate a program because I have 60 students who want electrical, does that mean I can't do that? If our comprehensive local needs assessment for Perkins says our region needs this program, does that mean I can't do that? And this language says I can't for 3 years. So I can't increase access for 3 years when the goal of this transformation is access to CTE. It feels counterintuitive.
For me, it's a language miss. It wasn't supposed to be centers, not programs. So I don't think we don't want to inhibit access and programs and.
Right. So I can't build a new center, but I can, if I find space and Spalding lets me, maybe I could add programming.
Well, and again, beginning language to start a conversation, figure out where the pinch points are, and clearly this is a pinch point. So thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah. Otherwise, the VACTED letter has been updated and it was attached to my testimony. And it's much the same as what we've been presenting for the last 3 years. The only change is that the governance, we support a change if it is what's best for kids, but we don't have a clear guidance on whether it should be a single district or if we should stay in regional districts. I think as you said, there are pros and cons to both. I think if the comprehensive high school model is your approach, then a single district might make it difficult to do that. It might be possible. I think we are 100% aligned that a BOCES is not the right step. It should either be a single school district or regional districts that include the CTE somehow.
Can you talk about why a BOCES wouldn't work?
I think it's more that we don't have clear definition and understanding of that. I think based on what has been said to me that the BOCES or Educational Service Agency has been presented because they think a school district, the AOE, believes a school district is then an LEA. And so they're afraid if they put the CTEs in a district, that makes them an LEA. But I'm a technical district and I'm not an LEA. So I'm curious about that. There's concerns about what does the role of executive director, how does it compare to a superintendent? And could just anyone walk into that role? Do they really understand all of CTE or not? So it's that concern. It feels like a district it's a layer between the Agency of Education, which has so many components of our work. They are the ones that deliver all the information to us. They are the ones that put out the grants. They are the ones that approve the grants. They are the ones that we have to ask for programming fund and they approve them. They also have people who teach programs that our teachers have to take. So they're involved in a lot of different things, and having a little bit of space between agency folks and the directors would be helpful. We do think that combining that comprehensive local needs assessment and taking a little work off the director's shoulders would be wonderful. And it's hard to understand how that would work and make sure that the system is equitable. So there would need to be some really clear definitions on how we move forward with that process. How do we make sure in this system, if it's a single district, that we're not taking resources from one to give to another, but that we're boosting the other? And it's going to be more expensive. It's not going to be cheaper. And so I know that some of the APA language in the most recent report is that they want integrated academics, English and math at every center. Awesome. Does that mean that a center like Essex, who has additional folks, has to give up some? We don't want to see that happen, right? We would rather build up capacity than pull away from others. If we were looking at the foundation formula that was kind of hand in hand with that BOCES, I know that Nicole could speak to how that's going to impact her center and what that they might have to close programming because of that, which reduces access. And the goal, again, is to increase access. So how do we make sure that we do that? And how does that district talk to however many other districts there end up being in the state? That's the difficulty. And then how do you align if you're in regional groups where there's a different entity that's in charge who may not, and a superintendent who may not have CTE experience? How do you then make sure to align all the centers and get more equity across them if you have those regional ones? I think those are the challenges for each. Off the top of my head.
Questions? Michael?
Or we can go first. No, okay.
Oh, go ahead, go.
Oh,
You go.
sorry. If we were to merge the current CTE districts, make the comprehensive high schools across the board, and give a charge for those districts to close down facilities to make bigger facilities. Is that something that you see as doable?
If you give the funding for the construction along with that, potentially.
So
I think that it'll be easier in some regions than that. He's on the board in the host school of my building. So we sit in a region that it's like the poster child for this, right? We could pull together most of my sending schools, not all of them, but most of them into one building and put the new center there, and it would work. That's not true across the state. And so it's really hard to apply this one size fits all to our state. And I think that's what we're running into and trying to figure out where would that work well. And if it doesn't, what are the different models that we could have there that still allow students access?
So in other districts, and I'm just looking over at the map of the CPE districts, would you say that there is a capacity to do that in the others similar? Because I think we could probably get away with one high school for the central Vermont area, and it would be tough.
I think if we leave the Valley, Harwood, as a separate piece, we could probably merge Montpelier, Spalding, U32, Twinfield, and Cabot. We probably could.
I would save a lot of money, create a lot of equity, and well, it would create the ability for kids to have access to education that's equal for all.
Especially when you think of the initial APA study that was talking about how more students from this host school attend CTE than others. And that's true for me too.
And do you think that model could work in other of the districts? And realizing that there's going to be exceptions to everything, is it possible to close down a high school to
I haven't done the research, and this would be just personally me speaking. I think it might be possible in a couple of regions, but not all. Yeah. I don't know them all that well to know how that could, what that would look like and how it could work.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. A couple of just clarifications. I think you mentioned you were going through the draft and there were some things that you had some questions about. And you mentioned professional development. And
Yeah.
it wasn't quite clear what the concern was there. Is it a question of defining who was going to do what? or-
Yeah. So right now, in my district, I have 10 days of professional development for my teachers that I have control of, or the teachers and I have control of. And then outside of that, the Agency of Education provides 2 days a year, one in the fall and one in the spring, for our teachers to work across the state in the same program, so collaborative. We love, like, that's a great opportunity, and I do want teachers to be able to work with other welding teachers or other automotive or human services or whatever. We do want that, and we want that to not impact our programming, because right now we have to put subs in so that our teachers can go do that. So with that statewide calendar would give us that day in the fall and the day in the spring when all of our teachers across the state could get together. But I also would still want some in-house opportunities to work with staff on our own culture, climate, and instructional practices.
The 10 days. So you were concerned that I can't remember,
There was just a piece in here and it made it, the way I interpreted it, it felt like the AOE was providing all of the professional development for the new district. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't true.
Yeah, I hear. So I think the other question I had in terms of what you're talking about, you mentioned the word comprehensive, and I was wondering that was a goal, I think. Sooner or later, whatever. What do you mean by comprehensive? And I think there are two aspects, facilities, definitely, but also governance. And what did you intend the term to be?
So I don't think comprehensive high school, the way that it's been sort of thrown around in this committee, refers to St. Johnsbury and Linden Institute. I don't think that's the model. I think we're thinking of more of a Massachusetts maybe style of comprehensive or technical high school. And so you have access to everything there in one site, one larger site. So some students may only choose small components of that, and some students may choose the full programming. And I think that's what I keep hearing is of interest to folks, to make sure that all students have some level of access to career and technical education. So I think that needs to be clearly defined. If that is the end goal, what is a comprehensive or technical high school? What does that mean to all of us? One of the things that I forgot to say is that once you decide on a statewide graduation requirement for all students, and what of those CTE meets, that will also help in alignment across the state.
Follow-up. So you were talking about comprehensive, sounds to me in sort of facilities and curriculum programming kind of sense. What about comprehensive in terms of governance, in terms of, how do you govern? How do you govern is a funny word. Anyway, govern CTE versus how do you govern call it regular, but I think you know what I mean. So
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that a single CTE district might be able to help with that piece, but it may be that you need that regional district that we sort of have in a lot of our places, where it's the entire school district plus the CTE center is a part of that district, and that we're not separated out. It's hard. Is that what you're asking?
I mean, I think it's complicated, yeah. I was just trying to understand what you were meaning by comprehensive. And,
I was simply referring to the high school.
the facility kind of.
Yeah, the
Okay.
facility and the access for students.
Okay, thank you.
And I do think sometimes if we use the technical high school as a terminology, it helps separate out the two comprehensive high schools that we have in Vermont. Because it's very complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I just want to clarify for everyone, the way a comprehensive high school is defined in our statute is not the way we're using it, right? In our
Right.
statute, the comprehensive high school is a high school that does not have a tech center that offers tech programming. That's what our statute calls a comprehensive high school. So we have to be really careful, perhaps. Technical high school is a better way to talk about it if we're talking about something else. So we don't want to listening to us thinking, right? Because just because people call themselves something doesn't mean that's the legal definition in the state.
Yeah, and I definitely wouldn't advocate for that, the legal definition that we currently have.
So I have a question about the cost of CTE. I hear a lot about how it's expensive. And I kind of was curious to learn more about what the cost drivers are, if there are any changes that you'd make to kind of bring down costs, or is it a scale problem?
The cost drivers are the equipment that we have. We just, for instance, got Perkins money to update the brake lathe in our automotive program, which is a $21,000 investment. So it's really not just the big equipment, but also the supplies that we need for students to build things and to put together different components of plumbing or electrical and practice all of that stuff. Sometimes it gets donated, but a lot of it we need to purchase. And so that's expensive. And with the tariffs, it's going up significantly. Thankfully, our welding program has gotten a lot of donated materials because the cost of steel is quite crazy. So those are generally the cost drivers. Then when we think about if we're paying our teachers the way that we should be, even though they may not have a bachelor's or master's degree, if they are a master plumber or a master electrician, they should be coming in an equivalent because they've put in the same amount of time as someone in a degree program and being paid that level. And that doesn't happen across our state right now. And that can be expensive. But if you want to pull someone from industry who has the experience and knowledge to teach our kids, we need to be able to pay them to do that. And it's often they're taking a pay cut, a quite significant pay cut to come to teaching. So that's another area where it could increase the costs. And then our facilities were on at least 10 of our facilities of the 17 were on a list in 1999 that needed renovation, and they're still on that list. Yeah, and so some work has been done for some of them, but there's a lot of facilities upgrades or new buildings that would need, and that's not just CTE, that's across all of education, unfortunately.
Are you also able to access like grant funding outside of the education, that's education funding streams?
We have different grant funding than the typical, because we don't get like IDA, we don't get Title I funds because we're not an LEA. We get the Perkins, which is CTE specific, it's federal. And then from the state, we sometimes get what's called time grants or GEAR grants. The GEAR is a governor's grant specific. Last year, GEAR was specific to the mobile home project for centers that got that. So it's kind of whatever the governor's priorities might be. The time grant is a little more open around starting new programs and supporting the initial pay and benefits for an instructor or getting equipment in for that new program or updating equipment and programs.
If the direction ended up being sort of regional districts with CTE as part, as just part of that regional district, can you just speak a little to pros and cons to that?
I think my colleagues will probably speak to that some too. I can speak to why did CVCC become its own district? Because this is year 3, right? And I stepped in when it was sort of an in progress piece of work. But my understanding was that for all of the years since sometime in the 60s, the Barry Vocational Center, which became the Central Vermont Career Center, had been governed by either the Spalding Board or the Barry District Board after the Act 46 merger. And the towns of Barry City and Barry Town were the only ones that could vote on the budget. The advisory board was made up of folks from across all of our sending schools and some industry folks, and they were able to usually put forth a budget that the Spalding or Barry board supported and moved forward to the community, which they also supported. But there was 16 towns that did not get a say in that vote. And we wanted to make sure that we were representing all 16 towns and not just the two that we resided in. And so we really pushed to move to that level and also to take a, because at Barry, you can tell if Barry City or Barry Town passes their budget. We wanted to take away that component. And I saw that was in here too, the commingling of ballots. And so there's nobody pointing to a single town when something fails or a single group of towns. But we can say the majority of our voters supported the Career Center this year across our 18 towns. And that's a really important piece to know that you're supported by the majority of the folks across all of them instead of just in two areas. And we weren't getting that feedback the same way. And at the time, the chair of the Barry board was not Michael. And they didn't feel comfortable with having that power to impact CVCC as much as they did without the impact from others, which I think was really wonderful and lovely of them to be thinking about. And so this gives every single board in my sending schools has an appointee to my board. So every sending school has a say on my board. And that's why we did that work. So if you were to set up regions where everyone has a voice for that center, I think that is what we did, right? We just didn't have that in the current setting.
Just to clarify, so I understand, right? So 16 towns, each sends a representative from their board to your board?
So I have 18 towns total.
18, okay.
There are 6 sending schools. So each one of those sending districts has a representative on my board. And then I also, for the 4 largest districts, have a voted in person, an at-large member of my board. So I have 10 members.
Gotcha. And then your budget goes to town meeting for all.
Correct.
All 18 towns have a item on their town
They
meeting.
have a separate ballot that we put out, and then all those ballots are brought to Barry the next day or Thursday, and then they commingle them, and then we get the overall count.
That's really helpful.
So you have a mix on your board members, there's a mix of appointments and election.
6 appointed, 4 elected.
So those ballots go in as well.
Yeah, so they, even if it's not someone from their region, everybody votes on it.
So thank you. I really appreciate the detail and helping us understand because, some of us understand our region, some of us understand that there are multiple different systems and don't have an understanding of any of them. So giving all of us the same understanding of how the depth of it's really helpful for us to understand it. And so my question is more in access and programming. And when, as a standalone district and standalone school districts, and you offer full and part-time programming or just?
Right now, we only offer full day. And I need to clarify that again, like every time I say that, full day is a 4-hour program. So my full day is that kids come, they're in program from 8:30 to 12:30, and then they go back to their sending school. Other people have full days and they have additional resources for students. So the students are actually there from maybe 9 to 2:30 or 8:30 to 2:30. And other centers have half-day models for programs that are 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. And the kids might go back to their other school or they might stay there and access other programming and academics. So it's hard to, they're so different. And that's one of my questions is that what the AOE is looking for alignment in? Do they want everyone to be 2-hour or 4-hour programming? What does that mean? Do they want to mix across all of us? And we don't have an answer to that yet.
Right. We don't have an answer to that. Yeah. So just to keep going. So all of your sending schools have some programming that they offer for the students, math, English, whatever it is. And then they come to you at the set time. So you've organized the schedules so that, or they have organized the schedule.
They have organized the schedules
for programs when your programs aren't being offered.
Presumably. Yes. So most of the time it's US history, financial literacy, PE, health. Those are the ones. the director before me made an agreement with all of the sending schools. So all of our students get these embedded credits or proficiencies, depending on which sending school it is, from each program. So they get English, social studies, science, and math out of each of our programs. So students already get that. So it's just the other ones. Most of them have figured out a way to provide what our students need for graduation, not necessarily what they might want to access at their sending school. And my host school, unfortunately, about half of my students from that center, from that school, go back to a third block class that is started 20 minutes before they can get there. And so they're going in after the instruction in many cases. And I feel like that's not fair to them. There should be a different way. It sounds like next year it's going to be the same schedule. So I've begun talking with that principal about how can I supplement for that time for those students, just to make sure that they're not, I can't imagine having to walk into a class every day 20 minutes late. It just doesn't, and that's if I don't go to get lunch. If I get lunch, I'm even later. And or getting tracked in the programming that you're in when you go back to your sending school, which regardless of how much we try to avoid that is happening.
So, yeah, I'm just trying to, because what I'm trying to understand, and I know people have other questions too, what I'm trying to understand is, as an independent district, how it works with the sending schools, but it's very similar to a district with a RAB. It's
Correct.
okay.
It's just I have a school board instead,
Okay.
and I have a facilities use agreement, similar to what was outlined here.
And yeah, either way, you have your contract with your staff separate from the districts, since you are your district.
Correct.
So you have
So I negotiate that. Yeah, my board
all
does.
of the other pieces still have to be negotiated with the sending schools. Right. That's next. I know Abby had got questions as we started asking.
Well, so you answered a question about whether school day was aligned, because that's with, so it sounds like the typical student will come 8:30 to 12:30, and then they go back to their setting school for the afternoon. And it sounds like to a certain degree that schedules are aligned, but not always.
Right.
What about the calendar? Is that aligned?
Yes.
So all the six sending schools and the CTE, the calendar is aligned.
The majority of days, we sit down together, the superintendents, and we create that schedule. So all of the vacations are aligned. There's occasionally a PD day that's different, often because of the collective bargaining agreements that might be different. One group might have 180 student days and 5 PD days for their teachers, and I have 180 student days up to and 190 days for my teachers. So it depends on those collective bargaining units, how that rolls out. But for the most part, the schedule is the same. There's occasionally a day. We do have one sending school that releases early every Wednesday, so that they come and get their kids early every Wednesday. So that's 15-minute impact. My understanding is next year's schedule is different, so they won't be taking their kids away early next year.
Okay, thank you.
So I have one very small, I guess, vocab question. Well, it's shared that I'm a little startled to hear that students have to choose to not eat lunch or to be 20 minutes late or more than I'm a little surprised.
I think they're bringing their lunch with them.
Okay, that seems like it would be a
Yeah.
foul of some sort of environment. But you used the word tracked, and I wasn't sure if I knew what you meant by that. So I was wondering if you could just explain what you meant by that.
So in a couple of my sending schools, when students return, they have specific courses like US history, where the only students in that course are from the tech center.
Oh, okay. Just a coincidence.
That's how they've set up a schedule.
I was saying, that's right.
Isn't it
And it can, in some ways, it can be a positive of this cohort of folks who have a lot in common already, but it could also be a negative.
Okay, and so statutorily, and from our understanding of what's okay to do, that would not be okay to do unless it was an attempt for just logistical simplicity, like we gotta have a history class.
Yeah, and there's still, that's history class is very similar to the other US history class throughout the day. It just only has the CTE students in it.
Students who need to be in there.
And if that's the case, and maybe we have a different model in the future, is there a way that I can deliver the same proficiencies that are focused also on the area of interest for the students that would better meet their needs?
Thank you.
I feel like I spoke a lot more from my perspective than back Ted, so I just want to be clear about that.
It's because we're looking to hear the different models that are out there.
Yeah.
In order for us to make a good informed decision, so we need to understand each model that's there. So the number of sending schools that you have, we found that they also provide some type of CPE program in your school as well.
Some of them have similar programming. There's a lot of digital photography or digital media arts courses. There's some cooking classes in a couple of high schools. There's some overlap. There's some, one of them has a wonderful teacher who teaches a little bit of welding and teaches furniture design. So there's some of that. There needs to be something. The factory model of education does not meet most students' needs anymore. And so finding a way to transition to a model that does meet their needs, I heard you talking about that yesterday, I think is really important.
Yeah, you have many more sending schools than up in my way. We only have one. But I find it difficult to understand, or I don't think the taxpayers in the sending school really understand what's going on, that they're actually paying for CTE twice for some. Because if their school is providing some,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And then they're also paying for the CTE center as well.
Yeah.
And so and I think as we progress, when we have these sending schools, if we're not building one unit for CTE for everybody,
Yeah.
then how do we provide, if some of those schools are already doing it, should that be linked to the Career Center?
Technically, if it's programming that's CTE, it should have an instructor that's endorsed in CTE. I think that's only true at one of my sending schools, that they haven't endorsed, and I don't supervise that person. I didn't hire them. So it really needs to be considered. There are times when I think I don't know how many years ago, it's probably 15 years ago now, that the freshman foundations or exploratory program was hosted in some of my sending schools, and then the students came, and that was sort of supervised by the center. And I think there was some value to that, because it did provide that opportunity for students to access. My son went to Harwood University, Harwood Union School District, and I think the programming that he was able to access there in 9th and 10th grade, which isn't there anymore, but there was a teacher who did like small engine type stuff. And there was a teacher who did electrical. Those things kept him engaged enough before he could get into Randolph Tech, which is where he went, because he got waitlisted at mine center. I wasn't there. He still probably would have gotten waitlisted. So I think it's important to recognize that we have students who have needs that are not being met early enough. And so sometimes these programs provide that, and making sure that it's delivered in a way that meets our standards and can provide those proficiencies for kids is something that we need to think about. And I often think about the numbers of students on plans, and I might have said this last time I was here. Often our centers have 37 to 40% of our students are on plans, and in our sending schools, they have 20% on. And by the end of that year, many of them are taken off of those plans because they actually didn't need them. They needed the engaging education. And so how do we find opportunities to engage our students earlier? And CTE, however it's developed and defined across that, as long as it maintains its rigor and provides students with those literacy and math skills that they need to be successful, could be a way to help do that.
And I just wonder if there's an opportunity here. Create some satellite in those sending schools, be able to provide, especially for the programs that are really popular. And to be able to create some of that so that they may not have to go to the CTE center 5 days a week, that they could do, and maybe go to the center 1 day a week. So
Yeah, it's just,
Just-
how do you supervise that? Who's in charge of it? Who makes sure that all the safety pieces are done? Like, how do we partner and share that piece? If you pull us into a single district separate from that, that's going to be a lot harder. I haven't had that experience, but I think maybe some of the folks that are speaking later today have. And it might be good to really understand what are the pros on that as far as access, and then what are the challenges to that as far as supervision, making sure that someone's there at all times to take care of something if it happens, and what else comes up. I don't have that knowledge.
Also, I think something that we really need to think about, this effort is try to get more kids into CPE. That we have a lot of programs that are already oversubscribed, and now we're trying, we want more. Are we creating, so I think we have to think about that in the long run of, we're opening things up and we want more, and we want to get, middle school involved. We want more pre-Tech, 9th and 10th graders. But CTE it's expensive. And buildings are only so big. And so we have to have that in the back of our mind, that through this expansion and opening things up, what's it, down the road, what is it going to take for us to be able to accept? Because I'm imagining we're not going to have just 5,000 students a year wanting to go through tech. I think that once we're able to open it up and, getting rid of the money following the child, I think we're going to see more use of the career centers. And so we have to be ready for that as well.
Yeah, we definitely need more capacity for sure. I know there's plenty of students that unfortunately didn't get into my center for next year that wanted to. I thought of something as you were talking about that, and then I lost it. So I'll have to follow up with an email maybe when it comes back.
Any questions? Like,
Can you remind me how much it was going to cost for a new center?
Good question. I think it's around the 200 million mark at this point. It is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. It's beautiful though. I know what I was going to say. The cost, when my center was doing some work with our architects to try to figure out what might we want in our new center that we're in concept design for right now, as long as July 1 doesn't shut us down. And we went to Maine and looked at some centers that had been built there, and outside of the doorways on some of them were sponsorships from businesses. So I don't know what that brings into the mix. I don't know the positives and negatives of that. But there are certainly lots of partnerships that we have with businesses throughout the state, and we are building the workforce. So is there an opportunity to partner in other ways there too?
Put us in a totally different direction. Transportation, we were talking about just sort of over the course of the day, the kids have to go back and forth between sending schools and CPE centers. And one question is, are those times kind of specific, or do they like run into like transportation shortfalls at all?
There's definitely been in the last 2 years a lot of issues around transportation and finding bus drivers. For me, it's very specific timeline of they come in before 8:30 and the buses show up and leave by 1 each day. So it's less impactful. I think the morning route has been more impacted. We've had one bus that struggled to get to us on time this year because of the shortage in their region. And then stepping back at the greater transportation thing, because I have an overflow of students interested in some of my programming, I've been advertising the other tech centers as you didn't get in here, but you could go. And I think Ruth mentioned to another committee last week that we've worked with Randolph because they have their own buses to potentially come up and pick up some of those students if they choose to apply to Randolph and get in, because their schedule is offset just enough that kids could come to my center, get on a bus, go to Randolph, which is a lot of busing, access their programming, and then bus back to their districts. So we're exploring that kind of as a pilot. It would be difficult to, as a single district, to figure out the transportation across all different sending schools to different centers.
Do you have a sense of what is the greatest transportation burden that a student attending your studies might experience in terms of time?
I think that Harwood and Cabot are probably my two furthest away. And I know for the Harwood students, they have a separate bus that comes to me because their school day, they changed their start times a couple of years ago. And so their school day starts later. So this bus goes around and picks up all of the students for CTE and then comes down, and then buses go out to pick up the rest of the high school students. So they're on significantly earlier, and I would say probably an hour would be the longest, but I don't know that for sure. One way, yeah.
So, sort of just getting a sense that the sort of big goal is to increase access to CTE but they're, we've been talking about a number of different avenues to do that. From your perspective, what would you see as the top priorities that we could change that would improve access?
I think clarifying the graduation proficiency is required and including CTE in that would be a huge step. I know one of our centers has 11 sending schools, so that's 11 different sets of graduation proficiencies. I have 6 different sets, plus a few kids who come in who are coming in for specialty programs from other districts that they're all so varied that the graduation requirements are probably step number 1 in making sure that we're aligned and that we know what each program offers across the state. Otherwise, it's just making sure that we have the space available to fit kids into, and what model's going to get the most access for students. So if there's full day and half day opportunities, how do we make sure there's enough of those going on so that students who want access can get it?
You're looking at your process of building a new center. How are you determining what you want in the building as far as courses? And then are you working with your RAB? Do you have a RAB?
My school board is my RAB. Yeah.
So do you have people from the business world that sits on?
Yeah, on our facilities committee. Yeah.
So you're looking at that, trying to figure out what you want. You incorporate that in your building?
Yeah, so we've used the comprehensive local needs assessment from the last 2 years, 2 times that we've done it, and yearly surveys to our students, plus our sending school students who don't attend, to see where their interest is, and also to businesses to see what their needs are. And so there's 6 programs in the new design that don't exist in my center right now, that are based on that CLNA data. So the hope is that we could build up to that. this feels a little off track, so maybe I should come back and talk really about that plan. Because it's ambitious. It would have, if not placed on a campus with one of the sending schools, it could have a significant impact on all of my sending schools. Because the goal of the board is to have a standalone CTE center that is full day. So not just the 4-hour programming, but other programming that is different than the traditional model of high school classes.
I have a question on the building. Do you have any thought about additional uses or like training opportunities for just to kind of maximize the use of the building?
Yeah, certainly that's, I think I came here last time and said that our failure has been in adult ed at my center. We used to have LNA when I got there and we had a great instructor and unfortunately she had to leave and we haven't been able to replace her and we've just done these little pieces. Just recently, the Emergency Services District reached out to us to take on all of their training for EMS for District 6. And so we're talking through what that would look like and how we can do that. But taking on that sort of training or providing those spaces in the evenings and afternoons and weekends would be wonderful. One of our struggles has been finding an adult ed coordinator. So right now, because we also have an opening in our co-op program, we've put out co-op and adult ed, and then we've also put out a combined position to see if we could get some interest to start building those. There's a lot of building up to that new center idea and the board's goal of full day with everything that students need to graduate in that building and also access for outside resources. Right now, Berrytown EMS had given us an ambulance. In return, they get to use our space and our equipment to do training for their staff. And so we would love to expand that too, not get any more ambulances, but just to expand the access to, we have this equipment and we have all of this state-of-the-art stuff. Is there somebody else who needs to come in and use that? And so working on those partnerships.
I mean, we're creating this. So we could do like a phased approach to different districts, right? I mean, certain districts might be more primed for that. We were to move down to a comprehensive model.
We're calling it a technical high school now.
Technical high school, that's what we're calling it? Okay.
Because it's not defined in law. Say comprehensive, then it's
Correct.
defined in law as something that we're not talking.
Okay, so technical high school. We could do a phased approach where certain districts might be like perfect. It's like Berrytown and Berry City being the perfect poster child of merging. We could do that, right? Couldn't we write that into the legislation that it would be, we can do whatever we want?
Like a pilot? Are you talking about piloting it somewhere?
Yeah,
I'm gonna encourage
Not to do
things
that.
statewide
Yeah.
and that about any specific local district, because if we I think part of the reason we're where we are today is because we piecemealed this based on, this will work great right here. How do we make that happen? This will work great right here. How do we make this happen? And we end up without equity and we end up without opportunity for students across the state. And so I would hope that we can use our energy collectively to look at what's best for the state and figure out how to get everybody that same great opportunity, right? If it means a pilot district, once we have that vision, it might. But I wouldn't start with that just because that might take all of our energy. And that's my personal take, and that's what I would hope we can do together.
which I agree, but there are some districts that might not be ready to do it at that moment. Because Act 46 had a do it or else clause to it, right? And if you did it sooner, you got, what was it, $4 million? 2 million?
No, it was, go ahead. Anyway.
I don't remember what it was. It was, yeah. And I'm just wondering if that, might work or not. But it didn't work, obviously.
So right now, we're not at the point of where we need to have committee discussion on where we're going, because we don't really know where we're going yet. We have a lot more people to hear from in order to get more information to determine,
Yeah.
have those discussions.
And I know at least one of your online folks has to leave at 10:30. I don't know about both of them, so
No,
get out of the way.
Sue's only available from 9:30 to 11:30, and who is? Eric needs to. Okay. Eric? Good morning. Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Remmers. I am the director at Green Mountain Technology and Career Center in Hyde Park. I am also the vice president of VACTED, which I assure you was a democratically elected process. So I really, Jody has hit a lot of the points that that I would address through or on behalf of VACTED. There's one piece that I will add on to, and then I'd also like to speak for myself just a little bit about the bill. So first off, what I want to say sort of on behalf of VACTED is just that there are concerns around timelines and how quickly this seems to be moving. And we understand that there's urgency around making change. There's urgency in terms of helping reduce tax rates across the state. There's urgency in a lot of different spaces. But the Directors Association, and through multiple conversations, and I think this is reflected in testimony given by both Jody and Jay Nichols, is feeling like that the Directors Association and CTE in general is out ahead of this train in ways that the rest of the system is not. And so I think some of that comes from this sort of separate process that seems to be happening with CTE right now. And while I'll speak to my perspective on the bill itself. As for me personally, I think I'm cautiously optimistic about things in here, and by no means are the CTE directors in agreement with that. I would say that I have concern around this bill or this process happening exclusively for CTE without the rest of the system having significant change being made as well. So, for instance, is there going to be action taken on the funding mechanisms and the foundation formula, which is a critical component of whether or not this bill will operate effectively? Are there going to be reductions in supervisory districts across the state, consolidations there? Because if those aren't happening right off, then if we go to one district, we are going to be adding expense to the entire system, not taking expense away. Because we are going to be adding a whole new supervisory structure to this with central offices and representatives and all of that other stuff. So the thing I think that then, and I haven't really spoken to folks in VACTED about this, but I would like this committee to make sure that they take a look at, is the document that was recently put out by the Superintendents Association around the VSA's timeline and framework for incremental change, which does identify that these two things have to be happening in tandem, that the broader system of education does need to be changing at the same rate and the same pace as what happens with CTE. Otherwise, we're going to be out there all on our own, not entirely sure what the funding mechanisms are going to be looking like and whether or not we actually fit with the system that's created for the rest of the state. And that's not to say that we as superintendents, as directors are afraid of change. In fact, I think there are some really beneficial things that could be happening for CTE and my center specifically, if we're talking about our specific needs. But I just want to make sure that we are looking at this as a comprehensive systemic change, not just CTE, because when we just do one piece of the system, then things tend to not work with the rest of the system. So making sure that this all intermeshes in the way that makes sense. So
Eric, just stop you there. So
Sure.
I want to reassure you and everybody else that that's exactly what we're doing.
Great.
That we understand that we can only go so far right now until we understand what the education committee is coming up with.
Great.
before we can really delve in. You haven't seen any funding discussion in the bill yet because we don't know where that is right now.
Exactly.
And we don't know, is it gonna be 5 districts? Is it gonna be 9? Is it gonna be 19? We don't know.
Right.
So this is more of a first attempt to take a look at it and to have these discussions with everybody so that we get a good feel of and a better understanding of the system now and how the system can improve, be much better for students.
And that's totally appreciated. I just think that, you know, the CTE directors in specific have really been intensely focused on this issue for some time now about what structures are going to make sense for CTE across the state. You know, we've worked with APA for 2 years now, while the rest of the system is just sort of unpacking what that looks like. And we've had these debates in a way that, you know, I mean, and we're this sort of hybrid administrative group, right? Like we have some roles and capacities that are essentially supervisory level in their nature and also like building level in nature. And so, you know, it's not like the rest of the principals across the state of high schools are getting together to have these conversations. There's just no real organization for that to happen on a regular basis. But we, month after month, are having critical conversations about what structures are going to be most supportive of our students. And I said, we've thought really deeply about these things and just don't want to be out ahead of the process when the rest of the system really needs that structure as well. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys are taking that sort of comprehensive approach to that. But I would, like I said, encourage.
I have a question from another.
Jim, please.
Oh, hi. Could you just walk us through how your tech center works in terms of governance, sending schools, all that, you know, what is the, and also kind of pros and cons?
Sure. So we serve 5 high schools. So we serve Stowe, People's Academy, Hazen Union, Craftsbury, and then we are on the Lamoille Union campus. So we serve Lamoille Union. So we're serving about 12 different towns and there's some choice towns in there as well, like Wolcott and Walden, that folks can choose to come to us as well. So if we're talking about how our day functions, we are a full day model, and our full day model does include embedded academics. So our students come to us, our day starts at 8:15. All of our students arrive at that time. And then we are done at 2:00, where the schools that students from schools that are off of our campus are bused back to their campuses at 2:00. And then the students that are from Lamoille Union, they walk over and take a 4th block class. Those students who are not on from Lamoille Union, they go back to their sending school so they can catch buses to get home. So they don't necessarily take a 4th block class at their sending schools. Although we sometimes try to finagle agreements with the Lamoille Union so that they can, if they need a credit in some space, that they can go up and take a class up there. So yeah, that's our day structure. We don't have the transition spaces that Jody described. You know, we have an independent Green Mountain Tech lunch. That's 30 minutes every day. So, you know, our kids come in, we have break, we do our work, they have lunch, they get in the lab in the afternoon, and it's a pretty consistent sort of routine that we have.
What about governance? Like, do you have a separate board?
Yes, we have a RAB board. So our RAB board is an advisory board. And so any formal decision around budget or, you know, large purchases or whatever has to go through the Lamoille North board. And that's an 18-member board representing the 5 towns in Lamoille North. Yeah, that's our structure.
So is there congruence between your sending high schools and the Lamoille board or because I think that the issue is around governance, right?
Yeah.
And is there any difference between who's sending students and whether they have representation on the board, on the board?
So the representation is, we have it in our own rule and it's in statute, around who needs to be represented on the RAB board. So, each of our three, so we serve three supervisory unions, and each of those supervisory unions, superintendent serves on our board. A member from each one of those district boards is also on our board, and those are chosen by those school boards to be members of our RAB board. And then after that, we have industry representatives that are on our board.
So, yeah, so that's the RAB board. But I think you mentioned that the Lamoille board itself actually set budgets, for example.
Correct. And that does not represent any of that only represents Lamoille North and the towns of Lamoille North.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Did you have more you wanted to, I know we interrupted you, so.
No, it's totally fine. Totally fine. You can, it makes sense. No, the only other thing that I would speak to is to the bill itself. And that's really only on my own behalf, in relation to Green Mountain Tech and how the bill would in some ways, like I said, I'm cautiously optimistic around this sort of structure in supporting the work that we do here at Green Mountain Tech. I think last time I came before you, I described us as a relatively rural tech center. We're a mid-sized tech center, although we are growing. We're seeing significant student enrollment increases over the last 3 years in particular. Given that we're in Lamoille North, which is itself a rural district, with certain limited resources, I'm not one to complain about resources. We have a wonderful building. We were one of the last buildings that were redesigned in the mid-aughts for the purpose of technical education, and we take advantage of that. But from my perspective, when we start talking about governance in terms of a centralized supervisory union for career and technical education, I feel like in my district, and I think that in several other districts across the state, there's just not enough understanding of career and technical education from our supervisory union offices, in terms of content, curriculum, business management, those sorts of things. The particular needs of career and technical education get overshadowed by the needs of the district, which, our curriculum coordinator in Lamoille North, there's one of them, and they are overwhelmed by the new reading initiatives in K-6 and the new, Bridges program for math and those sorts of things. And while, I personally, I try to pride myself in offering as much support, both curriculum and instructional practice and whatnot to teachers, when we also don't have the sort of level of support that, say, a Burlington or Essex or some other places where they have multiple business managers, or maybe not business managers, but curriculum directors and things of that nature that can tailor instruction and tailor their focus to support and grow programming, and help with professional development, things of that nature. Those sorts of things are the things that excite me about a more unified district that is tailored and solely focused on career and technical education. The hope that we could potentially generate more support for growing our programs and what actually happens in them in a day-to-day basis.
So in terms of access and increasing access to CT, what would you see as the priorities that we could change to improve access?
That's tricky. I think all of us are really questioning how would any change at this point really increase the number of students that are in our facilities on a day in, day out basis. And that answer to that is going to be different for each one of our tech centers based on how our centers are structured. I have a full day program, and I have programs that I can't add more than 16 students to have more than 16 students in a program without hiring an additional certified teacher in that program. And so the question is, how do we do that? And even if I were to hire additional person, do I have the space to actually do those things? Those are all big question marks for folks. Certainly there's conversation about how do we reach down into middle school? What does that look like? And that's where I think that, I know I, for one, have struggled in that domain. When we start talking about our centers of my size in particular, having the resources to be able to reach down and provide opportunities for middle school students that go beyond just, tours or a demo day or something like that, providing an actual semester-long class or year-long class or something like that for students is just something that has been beyond the capabilities of many of our tech centers. And so, there is thought about whether or not some sort of unified supervisory union structure that has people dedicated specifically to that task would be able to help navigate that more. The answer, for me, I don't know. I don't know what that we would have to see, what proposals there would be for both the provision of those classes and the supervision of the people doing those things. Because as Jody said before, it is particularly hard to supervise people that are in widely, spread out spaces. My Hazen Union is 25 minutes from me. Stowe High School is 30 minutes from me. We've got a middle school over in Walden and other places. So getting out to those places to provide services is a logistical trick that I don't have an immediate answer for, but perhaps in a more unified collaborative system, we might have an answer for that.
Thank you. Dave?
Eric, do any of your sending schools have tech programs of any sort on their own campus, or even the middle schools? Are they showing any interest perhaps in developing something less than a full-blown tech center, obviously, but if you will, feeder programs at all?
Well, okay. So yeah, I think there are a couple answers to that. Is there interest? Absolutely. I think that one of the reasons why CTE is so popular and is growing in popularity is also what Jody mentioned, is the level of engagement that students have when they're here with us. They're doing things where they're actually seeing learning applied and feeling the results of that. That it really is a critical component. And I think that in my district, I have the one or two schools that recognize that perhaps they have students that are not maybe prepared to go to career and technical education, but they still have that problem of engagement and are building, I don't know, I'd call it more dabbling programs or dabbling classes where kids are getting, maybe to tinker on a small engine, or doing a little bit of forestry work where they're going out doing tree identification, maybe managing some Christmas tree lots and making some wreaths and doing those sorts of things, and blending aspects of programming into their curriculum so that they are keeping students engaged in the process. But is that really doing what career and technical education is designed to do? No, it's not. It's not getting them the industry credentials or the college credits or the things that we are intending to give students so that they have access and opportunity as soon as they leave our centers. So there's sort of I think other schools, middle schools, high schools are trying to fix a problem of engagement by tapping into things that we're doing. In some places, I think there has been a little bit of overstepping, where there have been places in the state where schools have been, you don't have to go to the tech center for an auto program. We'll do a thing here and, retain those tuition fees, which goes to the competitive funding and all that other piece. By and large, though, in my experience, I have not seen that the competitive funding really be that big of an issue. It is more about that engagement piece. Can we keep engaged and hooked in what we're doing? So the second part of the answer to that is there an entryway program to us? That does boil down to a matter of resources from my experience. And so my program or my center, we offer a pre-technology exploratory program wherein we have 10th graders with us. They've enrolled with us and they're with us. We got about 23, 24 of them, and they're with us for the entire year. They get all 4 cores. They're exploring all of our programs. They're spending all of their time with us before they make decisions to go into other programs in their 11th grade year and potentially 12th grade year as well. We do not have a foundations program for any of our programs. And that is intended to be that entryway to for kids to explore whether or not going into a program is going to be the right fit for them, or is their preparation program. What I have seen is that our larger schools that have more resources are the ones that are tied to larger bodies of population, student population, are the ones that are then able to offer a foundations program. And so places like Essex, and I'm not sure if Burlington owns, at Stafford, I believe, has some foundations programs. These are content specific programs where kids are doing a class period in construction in 11th, 9th or 10th grade. They're getting hands-on with this, learning terminology, learning basics, so that when they go into that construction program, they know what they're going to be doing. Not all of us can offer that. I can't offer that, A, because of the resources that would require right now. I just don't have the space or people to do it. But B, there's some logistics to that around equity. Right now, if I were to offer something like that, I could only really offer it to Lamoille High School students because we're connected to their property and to their building, and kids could move quickly between us in a period by period basis. I can't offer that here at our center where we have the resources to do it well. I mean, yes, we could build something out of another school potentially, but our programs here and our facilities designed to do these things safely here at our center. And trucking, 9th and 10th grade students or 8th grade students from Hardwick to here and back, logistics of it just don't work, don't make sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have students who leave your program after a year to do the early college program with CCV?
We do. We do. So there is, that it is unfortunate when that happens, particularly if a student wants to, if they're potentially someone who would be interested in co-oping within that space. So again, there is difference, between how that affects people schools that are on half-day programming versus full-day programming. Our programming is designed so that their CTE experience is completed in 1 year. All of that programs, industry recognized credential offerings or college credit offerings are offered in that 1 year time span in the full day that we happen. So their program is complete after that 1 year. If a student wants to do a second year in a particular program as a 12th grader, they then need to go into our paid co-op program where they are going out and with one of our community partners and working in industry with them, coming back one day a week to earn a new industry credential as well. But that's pretty much how we work. So fortunately for us, if a kid does want to go into the early college program, they have completed one core cycle with us and then move on to that direction. What we often find, I would say that, there's 4 or 5 students that choose that option for us, and they're typically students that are, maybe in our business or creative media or other programs. But what we often find, given how we offer our programming, is that students in 11th grade, many of them want to take a program in their 12th grade year that has some sort of connection to their previous program. So, a construction student then wants to go and take electrical. Or a forestry student wants to take business because they want to start, a program. We really push that as well as like, how can you package your industry credentials and your college credits to really optimize what you want to do after school.
I wanted to hear a little bit more about the embedded academics, and how that shapes what some of the sending towns are doing, and why it is that some, from your perspective, that some CT centers provide that, why some wouldn't provide that, and what that simplifies for you, or what additional challenges that may create on your end.
Well, we have, I mean, this was something, this is my 6th year at Green Mountain Tech. Having an academics program was started years before, when this school did go to a full year model. And I think that was largely driven by logistics. The logistics of trying to meet student needs, and not having to truck them again over a wide expanse of towns and distances to get them those credits. Our math credits are embedded. I have in our programming, so I have a math specialist that I fund through Perkins. And he works with each one of our teachers, and he co-designs curriculum for our teachers, that is, content specific math, at, algebra 2 level, geometry, and helps our teachers instruct that math curriculum, so that they are getting that instruction, and so that they can pick up where they left off if they go back to high school, or they're going on to college, or what have you. Those proficiencies or credits are embedded in our program of studies for each one of our programs. And they're honored by our sending schools, so if they've earned those math proficiencies or credits. And I say either or because I've got 5 different schools, and each one of them has either credit requirements, proficiency requirements. I have some schools that are on a 1 through 4 point numeric scale for grading. I've got programs, schools that are on a 1 through 5 scale, which makes it interesting. So that's all offered and embedded. We have then a specific academics teacher. We call it academics because it is a blended sort of English / global citizenship sort of course, where students are, each program accesses that teacher for about 80 minutes twice a week, where they are also doing academic coursework, whether it's straight up traditional English, or they're working through some global events, or they are, connecting the reading, writing needs of their industry in that program, where they're, writing, cover letters, resumes, doing reading documents from, manuals and all that other stuff, and, trying to make it as industry relevant as possible, while then also picking up those English and or global citizenship credits along the way. We are at a place numeric in terms of student numbers, where right now I only have 1 teacher doing that, and it's a lot of work because we've got 160 students here right now, and that's a lot of students to be reading essays for, and all of that. So I am looking at adding another teacher, hopefully in the next year or so. Yeah, that's what we have.
And so to continue on, I appreciate this detail and the yeoman's work of that 1 teacher with 160 students.
Yeah.
I presume then, you mentioned how the math specialist is Perkins funded. Is the English and academics, is that Perkins funded as well?
It is not. No, that's out of my regular budget.
And is that because that is not eligible for Perkins funding?
Well, it's I wouldn't be if I had never had one before, it would potentially be eligible, but now it would be supplanting.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. And do you find that you mentioned that these are honored, at the sort of the sending schools? Is there is the mathematics alignments easier to come by? Do you find the English and global citizenship requires, does that create any more friction's not the right word, but are both seen equivalently by the principals that are sending these students to you?
That's a tough question. So what I would say is, and what my experience has been is that we have not, and this is not true of all tech centers regionally at all, but we have not had to fight or argue for recognition of any credit that a student takes away from our programming. In fact, there have been times when we've had to question when a credit is actually added to a student, who happens to need an extra health or PE or something like that, and a school says, "Oh yeah, that's close," and okay, we didn't really instruct that. These are the things that we are instructing, and these are the things that we'll hang our hat on as saying that we know we gave this student this content, and we assess them in that. And now we are verifying that. We've had a little bit of the reverse. I think the question, though, does go to some historical conceptions of CTE and whether or not the programming in terms of quote unquote traditional academics is strong. And we would argue that it is, specifically in that we are taking those skills, those academic skills, and really targeting how they are applied within a day-to-day context within their program. And so for us, that's assessed through the statewide work keys assessment that all of our students do. And we're looking at growth as we're talking about career and college readiness levels as assessed by in math literacy and I forget the third one right now, but graphic literacy. We take that pre-post every year and we look at growth trends across the year to see that, yes, our instruction is gaining traction. Our assessment is moving the needle with students in terms of their understanding, and they are walking away with at least this assessment in hand, as well as our credits they're walking away with, to say that we have this understanding, we have these skills, and they need to be valued.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to thank you all. I have to run to an interview for a culinary teacher right now, but it was appreciate being able to talk.
Chop.
Thank you, Eric. We got to run too.
Good.
Thank you. So committee, I think we're going to take a 15-minute break. Before we go, I just want to bring us back. We're starting to expand our questioning into academics and programs. We're here now just to figure out how we create the governance. And so let's try to pull back and let's focus on how we do that.
But we're trying to understand the models.
There's models, but we're getting into programs.
Too much. Okay.
I think the models are, how are they interacting with the sending schools, how they, and all of that. And so let's try to bring back that, not that there's no value to, I love talking about CTE and the great things that they're doing. And I think, and it's easy to go down that road. So let's try to focus on what we're doing. So we'll come back in 15.